Have you ever been 100% certain about something, only to realize you were spectacularly wrong? Maybe it was in a job interview where you answered a question with all the confidence in the world, only to see a polite, knowing smile from the interviewer. Or maybe it was when you decided to assemble a bookshelf yourself, ignoring the instructions because how hard can it be, and ended up with something that looked like a collapsing piece of abstract art. That feeling, that mix of embarrassment and confusion, it's universal. We've all been there. It's the moment when reality shatters the perfect mirror we hold up to our own competence. But what if I told you these moments aren't random glitches in the system, that they are a programmed feature of the human brain, a psychological blind spot that prevents us from seeing our own shortcomings? And the cruel irony is that the least competent people are the most susceptible to this blind spot. And the scariest part? Most of us have no idea when we're in it. We're driving in a dense fog, convinced the sky is clear. In this video, we're not just going to talk about this bizarre psychological phenomenon, known as the Dunning-Kruger effect. We're going to do something much more important. We're going to build a blueprint, a step-by-step system to recalibrate your internal compass. We'll explore a simple technique used by Nobel Prize-winning physicist Richard Feynman to ensure he never fooled himself, and how you can apply it today. Stick around, because understanding this could be the difference between stagnation and your next big breakthrough in your career and your life. The Dunning-Kruger effect. You've probably heard of it. It's often thrown around as an insulting way to call someone too stupid to know they're stupid. But that interpretation is both overly simplistic and deeply unempathetic. The truth is, Dunning-Kruger isn't a condition that only affects other people. It's part of the human experience. Imagine the journey of learning a new skill is like climbing a mountain range. When you're just starting out, you read a few articles, watch a couple of tutorials, and suddenly, you feel like you've got it. You're standing on top of a small hill, but because the fog is obscuring the view, you mistake it for the summit of Everest. Psychologists call this the peak of Mount Stupid. It's where confidence soars far beyond competence. It's when you confidently give investment advice after watching 3 TikToks, or believe you can argue with a lawyer after binging a season of Suits. Empathy is crucial here, because that feeling is intoxicating. The feeling of certainty, of clarity, of capability. Our brain craves it, but then the inevitable happens. You start to learn more. You begin to see the complexity, the nuance, and all the things you don't know. The fog lifts, and you see the true Mount Everest looming before you. You plummet into what's called the Valley of Despair. This is where imposter syndrome lives. You feel like a fraud, that you'll never be good enough. Ironically, your competence is now increasing, but your confidence has nosedived. Most people get stuck in one of these 2 places, dangerously overconfident or paralyzingly doubtful. This video is not about shaming those on the peak or pitying those in the valley. It's about giving you a map and a set of climbing tools to show you the path up the slope of enlightenment and eventually to the plateau of sustainability, where your confidence is accurately calibrated to your competence. To do that, we first need to understand why our brains are so good at fooling ourselves. It isn't a bug, it's a built-in defense mechanism. And understanding that mechanism is the first step to dismantling it. In 1999, the social psychologists David Dunning and Justin Kruger published a landmark study. They were inspired by the bizarre case of a bank robber named MacArthur Wheeler, who robbed banks in broad daylight with his face uncovered. When he was arrested, he was in complete shock. "But I wore the juice," he said. He had naively believed that rubbing lemon juice on his face would make him invisible to security cameras. Dunning and Kruger didn't just laugh at his absurdity. They asked a question. Is it possible that incompetence not only makes people make bad decisions, but also robs them of the ability to realize those decisions are bad? They ran experiments in logic, grammar, and humor. The results were astonishingly consistent. The worst performers, those in the bottom quartile, didn't just get low scores. They were also the ones who most egregiously overestimated their own performance. They thought they did better than 60 to 70% of the other participants when in reality, they had only done better than about 12%. They were not only incompetent, they were unaware of their incompetence. Why does this happen? The answer lies in a concept Dunning and Kruger called the double burden. Think about playing chess. To be a good chess player, you need to know strategies, understand pawn structures, and anticipate your opponent's moves. Now, think about what it takes to evaluate a good chess player. You need the exact same skills. You need to know strategies, understand pawn structures, and anticipate moves. This is the double burden. The very skills that make you competent in a domain are the same skills. You need to recognize competence in others and in yourself. If you lack those skills, you don't just play chess poorly. You lack the very ability to see how poorly you're playing. Your own scorecard is blurred. Add to this a layer of psychological protection, our ego. It can be painful to admit I don't know or I'm not good at this. Our brain, in an effort to protect us from that discomfort, will create narratives to justify shortcomings. That test was unfair. My boss doesn't understand my vision. That client was just difficult. This defense mechanism combines with the double burden to create a nearly impenetrable bubble of illusion. Now, a crucial question often comes up. Isn't this just another way of saying imposter syndrome? Not quite, and the distinction is vital. The Dunning-Kruger effect typically describes people with low competence and high confidence. In contrast, imposter syndrome often affects high achievers who have low confidence. They're in the valley of despair. They feel like frauds who are about to be discovered, despite evidence of their success. Both are examples of miscalibrated competence and confidence. They're just on opposite ends of the spectrum. Another misconception is that Dunning-Kruger means you should never be confident. This is dead wrong. Confidence is essential for taking action, for taking risks, for leading. The problem isn't confidence. It's unearned confidence. Our goal is not to eliminate confidence, but to anchor it in real evidence and accurate self-awareness. It's the difference between arrogance and quiet self-assurance. So, why does any of this matter? Because Dunning-Kruger isn't just a fun psychological quirk. It has real, tangible consequences in the world. Think of the micromanaging boss who believes they know how to do everyone's job better than they do, killing morale and productivity. Think of the novice investor who, after a few lucky wins, bets their life savings on a sure thing and loses it all. Think of political leaders making catastrophic decisions based on a shallow understanding of complex issues. On a personal level, it keeps us stuck. If you cannot see your weaknesses, you cannot improve them. You repeat the same mistakes over and over, wondering why you aren't making progress. You become the architect of your own stagnation. Breaking this cycle is paramount. And thankfully, there is a way out. There is a blueprint. So, how do we escape the fog? How do we calibrate our internal compass? The answer isn't to try to be more humble. That's vague advice. We need a system instead. I call it the competence calibration loop. It has 3 steps. Step 1. Build your reality check system. Seek active feedback. People afflicted by Dunning-Kruger live in an echo chamber. To break out, you have to actively seek outside voices. But most people do this wrong. We ask vague questions like, "How did I do?" and get useless answers like, "You did great." You need to be specific and strategic. Here's how. 1. Identify the right people. Don't ask your mom. Find people who have expertise in the area you want to improve, and who you trust to tell you the truth, even when it's hard to hear. 2. Ask better questions. Instead of "How was that presentation?" try, "If there was one thing you would change about my presentation to make it 10% more impactful, what would it be? What was the single least convincing part of my argument for you? When you observed me in that meeting, did you see me do anything that undermined my own message?" These questions open the door for constructive feedback. And when you get it, the only rule is, do not get defensive. Simply say, "Thank you for sharing that." Write it down. Reflect on it later. Your goal is to be a data collector, not an ego defender. Step 2. Become your own best teacher. Apply the Feynman Technique. Now we come to the technique I teased at the beginning, used by physicist Richard Feynman. Feynman was a genius at distinguishing between knowing the name of something and understanding something. His technique is a ruthless test of true comprehension. It has 4 simple steps. Choose a concept, get a blank sheet of paper, and write the name of the concept you want to learn at the top. For example, artificial intelligence. Teach it to a child. Underneath that title, write out an explanation of that concept as if you were teaching it to a 12-year-old. Use simple language and easy analogies. Imagine you're teaching a robot dog. Identify knowledge gaps. This is the magic step. Inevitably, you will get stuck. You'll find yourself using complex jargon because you don't really understand it. You'll see missing links in your logic. Every time this happens, circle it. This is the precise boundary of your understanding. Review and simplify. Now, go back to your source material, books, articles, notes, and fill those gaps. Then, try to write your explanation again, but even more simply this time. This process forces you to confront your own ignorance. It turns unknown unknowns, the things you don't know, into known unknowns. The things you now know you need to learn. It is the ultimate competence calibrator. Step 3. Install the learner's OS. Cultivate a growth mindset. The first 2 steps will give you data feedback from others and clarity from the Feynman technique. But to actually use the data, you need the right psychological foundation. That foundation is what psychologist Carol Dweck calls a growth mindset. People with a fixed mindset believe that intelligence and talent are innate traits. Every challenge is a test of their worth. Criticism is therefore personal, and failure is a catastrophe. In contrast, people with a growth mindset believe that abilities can be developed through dedication and hard work. For them, a challenge isn't a threat, it's an opportunity to learn. Criticism isn't an insult, it's valuable information. Failure isn't proof of incompetence, it's part of the process of getting better. How do you cultivate a growth mindset? Change your self-talk. Instead of "I can't do this," add the word "yet." I can't do this yet. Focus on process, not just outcome. Praise yourself for the effort, for trying a new strategy, for having the courage to seek feedback regardless of the final result. See successful people as inspiration, not threats. Instead of feeling envy, ask, what did they do that I can learn from? These 3 steps, feedback seeking, the Feynman technique, and a growth mindset, form your competence calibration loop. It's not a one-time fix. It's an ongoing practice. It's a commitment to seeing reality just a little more clearly, every single day. We've been on quite a journey, from a naive, lemon juice-wielding bank robber to the peak of Mount Stupid and through the valley of despair. Most importantly, we've laid out a clear path forward. The blueprint is simple, but it's not easy. Build your reality check system by seeking targeted feedback. Become your own best teacher by using the Feynman technique to find your blind spots. Install the learner's OS by cultivating a growth mindset. This is about something deeper than just getting better at your job. It's about building a more honest relationship with yourself in a world that encourages us to project confidence even when we don't feel it. Admitting "I don't know, but I'm willing to learn" is a radical act of courage. It's where real growth begins. True wisdom isn't found at the peak of blind confidence, nor in the valley of self-doubt. It's found in the climb itself, in the constant process of calibration, in the humility to seek the truth, and in the confidence that comes from knowing that, wherever you are today, you always have the power to be better tomorrow. Now, I want to ask you a question. What is one area of your life where you are actively trying to calibrate your competence right now? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I read them all, and I believe sharing our journeys can help others on theirs. And if this video gave you value, if it gave you a new tool to think about your own growth, hit that subscribe button and join the Psych Blueprint community. We explore ideas like this every single week. Thanks for watching.